this path, we've run across a third person. And this third person is very important to me because it's a story that you guys might have just glossed over. They don't like telling the story in little kids' classes because it has to do with adult subject. But it has to do with the woman. I call her the woman at Jesus' feet. And it was the woman who was cursed with bleeding for 12 years. And she was deemed unclean. I have one more monologue that I want you guys to listen to, but it's a little bit longer than the first two. So I want you guys to pay attention. Think about it. It's a girl that wrote it like she was writing, like she was that woman writing in her journal, discussing, covering how she was feeling at that point in time. I want you to kind of put yourself into those shoes and see where you're at.
Dear Journal, I had a nightmare last night. And although I was completely aware I was having a nightmare, I didn't want to wake up because the reality of waking up was much more of a nightmare than any nightmare I have during sleep. I hated waking up this morning. I felt the same as I always do. Alone, dirty, and invisible. You would think after 12 years I would have gotten used to this feeling by now. But no, it still aches to the core of my being. Women complain about having a period for 6 days. Try 12 years and not knowing why. But it's not the physical pain, the physical bleeding that hurts so much, although it is annoying. It's the label of being unclean that just cuts so deep. It's the fact that I've been abandoned by my ex-boyfriend. I've been abandoned by my family, abandoned by my friends, people I was so close to, and shunned from all of society. And I'm alone. I'm always, always alone. And why? Because my bleeding makes me unclean, and therefore anything I touch will also become unclean. Merely saying the word unclean causes me to uncontrollably cry right now. Depression and anger are the only emotions I feel. I am out of hope, Journal. I am out of hope. I've tried every doctor and I get the same response. I don't know if I can go another day going through the pain I feel, Journal. I heard about this man named Jesus. They say he performs miracles and healings and whatnot. He usually comes through town, and maybe today I will catch him and ask him to heal me. But, then again, I'm an unclean woman. He will never, ever want to get near me. I'm a dirty, unclean, ruined, polluted woman. Why would he want anything to do with me? I guess I'll try though. After all, it's the only hope I have. Dear Journal, I have uncontrollable tears flowing from my eyes right now. I've never felt this way ever in my life. I know I left you hanging on the last entry and told you that I was going into town to ask this Jesus guy for healing. Let me fill you in on what happened. So I didn't realize how popular this Jesus man was, because it was a lot harder to get close to him than I thought it would be. Fearing what others would do to me if I got caught trying to talk to Jesus, aka a clean man, I started contemplating and going back and forth in my thoughts whether or not I should just go back home and forget my wishful thinking to be healed. But then I thought to myself, what do I have to lose? Let's say I get caught talking to this clean man and get killed. At this point, going home and continuing life is far worse than getting killed. This is the only hope I have left. So I decided to go in. Everyone was pressing up against Jesus and crowding around him, which made it impossible for me to get near him, or even see him for that matter. So I got on my hands and knees, and I crawled toward the direction he was walking, until I could see barely his sandaled feet and hemmed robe. I crawled even faster, afraid that I would miss my only chance to be near him. I felt bad even asking him for healing, considering he was already on his way to the ruler's house to heal a young girl. But I knew if I could touch his robe, even barely, and receive healing, he would never know, and I would never get killed for touching a clean man. So, I stretched out my hand, as far as I could, practically falling, and I touched his cloak. Immediately when I touched his cloak, I felt my bleeding stop. Whoa is right. This is not the reason I have tears flowing from my face, for the next part I'm going to share with you is the reason behind my tears. Immediately, when I touched his robe, I turned around and tried to haul 100 miles per hour so I wouldn't get noticed or caught. But Jesus stopped the instant I touched his robe. He turned around and said, "Who was it that touched me?" I froze. My heart stopped. All feeling was lost in my legs. I'm gonna die for touching a clean man. That's all I could think. Everyone looked around and denied touching him. I thought his friend Peter got me off the hook when he said, "Master, there is a massive amount of people surrounding you and pressing up against you and touching you." But Jesus said, "I know that, but this was different. Someone touched me, for I felt power go out from me." Terror filled my heart. I knew that I would be killed once he found out it was me. So, I timidly crawled my way back to the crowd. I stood up, legs shaking and everything. I started crying. I told Jesus, "It was me. I have been bleeding for 12 years and..." But then I paused, and I started tripping all over my words because of the way he was looking at me. Oh, I will never forget in my life the way he was looking at me as I was telling my story. His eyes, oh, his eyes. They were so soft and gentle. Don't ask me how, but in some weird way, they reflected love and kindness. Even more love and kindness than my parents showed me during my healthy years. His eyes were so deep that it felt as if he were looking into my soul. The crowds were saying hateful things to me, but it's as if he tuned out the whole world and was paying attention to me and me only. He noticed me. Jesus noticed me. With compassion and love, he noticed me. He then knelt down, put his arm around me, and he lifted up my head because I was too ashamed to look him in the eye. And he said, "Daughter." Gosh, the word daughter, I haven't even been called that in years. He said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace."
This is the one that really gets to me because it wraps up all of them. Because what do we see from the woman who was bleeding? We see someone who's without hope. She'd been to a lot of different places, tried to get fixed, and nothing. She was someone who was unclean. That means people could not be around her. So she was ostracized. She was set aside. She was looked down upon because of a condition that she had. It wasn't her fault. We see that not only was she without hope, but she was destined for misery. Her whole life was going to be that of somebody who was left alone, who couldn't know love, who would never understand human contact. There wasn't going to be nice people that would come over and give her hugs, or give her food, or give her a casserole, right? Because that's what we do, we give casseroles. She wasn't going to get that. She was going to be left alone her entire life. And so what did she do? She knew what she needed. And she sought out Jesus. She went to him. And what happened? He blessed her with more than healing. Did he heal her? Yeah, he healed her. His power healed her. But what did he give her? He lifted her up. He gave her that first touch, that first contact. He was there for her at that point in time. And what happened? He said, "Go." What happened? We don't know. We don't understand. We don't know the ends of these stories. And if you're like me, that gets frustrating. I barbecued ribs for the first time last night. I don't know if any of you guys know what's entailed in barbecuing. I had Chris Vogt showing me how to barbecue, and so if you guys know him, you know, it's like he's out there, "Oh, it's simple. You just do this." And I'm like, "How is it simple?" He's giving me like 13 rules on how to barbecue a rack of ribs, right? And so I'm out there, I'm like, all right, so I just slap it down, let the heat be on. I'll go in, and you guys are like, how hard is the barbecue? Well, it's hard. I'll share why. So I went in, and I was waiting for a few minutes, and then like I came back out, and I'm like, okay, it's done. So I flip it, go back in, come back out after a few minutes, and one end of it is just charred. Chris was like, oh, that's my favorite part. And I'm like, how can that be your favorite part? There's nothing left. And one end of it was really good. That's the endings that we don't know. Is it going to be the charred ending? The ending that turns out bad, or is it the ending that turns out good? And I think a lot of us, as we read these stories, as we understand what's happening, we might get it in our mindset, in our heads, that we don't know what's going to happen. Is she going to become unclean and then go out and have people make fun of her? Have people get down on her, and she finds out that maybe it wasn't good to be with other people? Is a person that was caught in adultery, does she try her hardest to be good and find out that it's just too difficult and go back to the life that she knew before? Is it a fail? Is the person, the Samaritan woman that met her, was she the one that went up and she was like, okay, the Messiah is here. I know what's happening. But then she heard what happened to him, and she's like, wow, that even happened to him. What good do we have? Did she give up? Was it the burnt side? The side that not even my dogs would eat it? And trust me, my dogs would not even eat those ribs, okay? Chris did, my dogs didn't. Or is it the side that turned out good? That all of a sudden they became something that God looked at, and He was cheering them on, and good things were happening. Is that what turned out? Is that the ending that was there? What do we have? Guys, the story's being written for you right now. Your story is not over. Ben Leach, your story is not over. Your decisions that you're making now are helping to shape how that story's going to go, but it's not over. God is not through with you yet. There's more to be written. As we start to walk down this path, we start to see little things where people come into our lives and leave, and we don't know what happens to them. We don't have that nice and tidy bow, the neat ending. We don't get that. But what we do get is our story. And we can help dictate what happens to our story. Because guys, that's starting to happen now. As we look at these three things, what was happening? The first one, Jesus met them. Guys, Jesus needs to become real in your life. You need to meet Him. He wants to give you the living water. He wants to be there with you. He wants to be there for you. And He's saying, I will be. All we need to do is give Him the time of the day to where He can help change us. We have the second aspect. We have where we get tossed in front of Jesus, and guys, that's not comfortable. That's not fun. We don't like going before the God of the universe, the creator of everything, and share with Him what we've done that's wrong. But we need to. How else is He going to show us the grace and the mercy that we need if we don't allow Him to give it to us? And finally, we have to know that He's the one we need to seek out. He's the one that we need to go to. Because everything else isn't worth it. Everything else is not worth fighting through other people, fighting through crowds, trying to get to see just that one glimpse, the heel, the hem of His robe. Nothing else is worth it at that point in time. And we need to come to that realization, for our story is not written yet.